The marble halls of Cautheres glittered with opulence and arrogance, their vaulted ceilings alive with shifting light from enchanted chandeliers. Music drifted from unseen harps, and laughter, sharp, cruel and endless, filled the air like perfume gone sour. The court of horn and flame was in session. Every noble demon, from crimson princes to obsidian warlords, had gathered to witness what they thought would be the evening's great amusement, the presentation of the captured human. He stood before them now, alone on the obsidian dais, stripped of armor and pride, a being out of place in a kingdom of living fire. Kale, the name sounded small in this world of grandeur, kept his head high regardless. His wrists were bound in silvered chains that pulsed faintly, whispering containment runes into the air. He could feel their weight like cold judgment. Around him, the nobles laughed behind jeweled goblets, tails flicking with delighted mockery. "Look at him," one sneered, her horns spiraling like onyx flame. "A soft creature of flesh and fear. How does he stand upright without breaking?" Another's voice followed, sweet as venom. "Perhaps he's a pet, not a soldier. The mortals keep beasts, we keep curiosities." Their laughter rose again, high and echoing. At the center of their mockery stood three figures, the sisters of the infernal line. They were the king's chosen envoys, daughters of power and symbols of impossible beauty. One blue as twilight, with hair of pink silk and eyes that gleamed like molten gold. Another, skin of deep emerald, a jewel burning faintly in the center of her forehead, her presence calm but coiled. The third, crimson as a dying sun, her horns curved elegantly back, her smile bright and sharp as broken glass. They moved together, always together, their laughter the most musical of all. "He's shaking," said the blue one. "Do you think he understands what's being said?" "Doubtful," said the green one. "They barely understand themselves. Perhaps he'll learn if we teach him," purred the red one. Kale didn't flinch. He'd endured worse than ridicule, storms that tore ships apart, deserts that buried armies, the sound of dying comrades who had believed the same lie he once did, that humans were powerless against magic. "You're enjoying yourselves," he said, his voice rough but steady. The words echoed strangely, translated through the hall's enchantments. The laughter faltered for a heartbeat. The blue one tilted her head. "He speaks," she said, feigning surprise. "And in our tongue, no less." "How quaint," murmured her crimson sister. "How fragile," added the green. Kale's gaze moved between them. "You mistake silence for weakness," he said. "That's why you've never learned what it means to listen." A ripple passed through the court. The nobles' laughter dimmed, replaced by whispers. The sisters exchanged glances, their smiles sharpening. "He's bold," said the blue. "Boldness can be endearing," said the green. "Or fatal," added the red, her golden eyes glinting. Kale met her gaze evenly. "That depends on who decides the difference." The silence that followed was palpable. Then, from the high throne at the end of the hall, a deep voice spoke. "Enough." The sound rolled through the air like thunder given form. The king of Cautheres rose, his presence alone enough to make the torches bow. His armor shimmered with runes that shifted like molten rivers, and his horns arched toward the ceiling like black spires. The nobles fell silent instantly. The sisters lowered their heads, though their eyes remained fixed on the human. The king descended from his throne, each step measured and terrible. When he stopped before Kale, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. "You came uninvited into my realm," the king said. "You slaughtered my sentries. You stood before my gates and demanded to be heard." His voice was not anger. It was curiosity cloaked in authority. "Tell me why." Kale lifted his chin. "Because your soldiers attacked the outpost of my people without warning. Because your flames burned the forests where our children sleep. I came for answers." The king studied him in silence. Behind him, whispers stirred again, disbelief that a human would speak of rights before the infernal crown. The blue sister laughed softly. "He believes we owe him an explanation." "How sweet," said the green one. "How stupid," added the red. The king turned his gaze toward them, and the hall froze. And yet, he said slowly, he stands where others would kneel. The sisters fell silent. Cale's breath steadied, though his heart hammered. I stand, he said, because I don't see gods here. Just people who forgot what fear feels like. For a heartbeat, even the torches dimmed. The king's lips curved, not in anger, but in something that almost resembled admiration. The court waited for his judgment, expecting laughter, execution, or both. Instead, the king turned toward the three sisters. You find him amusing, he said. They exchanged uncertain glances. Yes, father, said the blue one. He is a curiosity. A toy, said the green. A fool, added the red. The king's gaze hardened. Then you will keep your amusement, he said. You will keep him well. The words fell heavy, rippling through the hall like a blade through still water. What do you mean? Asked the blue, her smile faltering. I mean, the king said, you will learn from him. You will protect him. You will share his fate, as you have shared your laughter. The court erupted into gasps and murmurs. The sisters' faces shifted, shock, confusion, something dangerously close to panic. You cannot mean, began the red one, but the king raised a hand. I do, he said. He came into my house unbroken. Let us see if he can remain so when given power over those who mocked him. He turned his gaze back to Cale. You sought answers, human. You will find them here. The three who taunted you are yours to command within my court. The words struck the chamber like thunder. Cale stood frozen, unsure whether it was victory or punishment. The sisters looked at him with fury and disbelief, their pride wounded deeper than any wound of flesh. The king ascended his throne once more. Let it be done, he declared. And let Cautheres learn whether mockery or mercy is the stronger flame. The nobles bowed low, whispering like serpents. Cale remained on the dais, feeling the weight of every eye upon him. The three sisters stepped forward slowly, their beauty shadowed by the realization of what had just been taken from them, their freedom to sneer. The red one spoke first, her voice sharp as glass. You may have the king's decree, she said, but you will never have our obedience. Cale met her gaze without flinching. Then we'll start with honesty, he said quietly. It's more than I expected from a court of liars. A faint smile flickered on the king's lips as he watched them. Somewhere deep within Cautheres, the fires shifted, whispering of change. The laughter that had once filled the hall was gone, replaced by something else. Tension, curiosity, and a sense that the human, somehow, had already begun to reshape the infernal world around him. Cale stood tall, three furious daughters of flame before him, and the king's gaze upon his back. He didn't yet know whether he'd won or lost. But for the first time since his arrival in this burning realm, the laughter was not at his expense. The corridors of Cautheres were alive with whispers that night. Servants bowed and scattered as Cale passed, though not from respect, fear guided their movements. A human with royal favor was an omen, a riddle none wished to be near. He had been given quarters within the high spire, a chamber meant for emissaries of power, though its marble floors and silver-lit walls felt more like confinement than comfort. Across from his door stood the sisters, his appointed attendants, guardians, and tormentors. Their presence filled the hallway like perfume and threat combined. The red one, Visa, leaned against the wall, arms crossed, golden eyes smoldering with restrained rage. Enjoying your new title, human? She asked. Cale ignored her, walking past into his chamber. I didn't ask for it, he said. But I won't waste it. The blue one, Lyra, followed him in, her steps light as whispers. That's not how it works here, she said, circling him slowly. You don't get to choose what's wasted. You just are, a passing novelty in a long, dull eternity. The green one, Silith, closed the door behind them. Still, father was clever. Now we must keep you alive, even if it kills our pride. Her voice was calmer than the others, but colder too. Cale met her gaze, unflinching. You don't have to protect me, he said. Then what? Visa snapped. Let you get yourself executed again? You don't understand where you are. Then show me, Kale said. The sisters exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. You'd regret that, Lyra murmured. You think I haven't regretted worse? Kale replied. Visa's lips twitched, half amusement, half irritation. You have spirit, I'll give you that. Spirit doesn't last long here, Silith said. Everything burns, eventually. Then maybe I'll burn brighter, Kale said quietly. The words hung between them like sparks before a storm. Lyra tilted her head, studying him. You don't act like prey, she said. Most mortals beg when they stand this close to us. Kale met her eyes. Maybe they've only met devils pretending to be gods. Lyra blinked, thrown off for the briefest instant. Careful, little human, she said, voice dropping to a purr. We might take that as challenge. Days passed in uneasy rhythm. The court's attention had not faded. If anything, it had sharpened. Wherever Kale went, eyes followed. Nobles whispered behind jeweled fans. Courtiers tested his patience with cruel jests. Yet each time, one or more of the sisters was there, sometimes watching, sometimes intervening, always circling like predators unsure whether to kill or protect. The king's decree bound them to his side, and though they resented it, duty in Cautheries was law. Still, something began to shift between them. Kale learned their patterns, the way Visa hid her concern behind anger, how Lyra mocked to mask curiosity, how Silitha's silence spoke louder than any threat. Beneath the horns and fire, they were not untouchable. They were caged in expectation just as he was. One evening, during a royal feast, the tension reached breaking point. Kale had been seated beside the sisters, a position that drew as much envy as ridicule. Goblets clinked, laughter roared, and demon lords traded boasts of conquest. Our king grows sentimental, sneered a silver-clad noble. Soon he'll have us sharing our tables with beasts. Lyra's hand twitched near her cup, but Kale placed his hand on the table first. You say that like you're not the ones gnawing on each other's bones for amusement, he said calmly. The laughter that followed wasn't mockery, it was shock. The noble's smile froze. You forget your place, he hissed. You forget your mirror, Kale replied. You'd see what you really are if you dared look. The hall went silent. Visa half rose from her seat, ready to pull him back, but the king's laughter rolled through the chamber like thunder. He's right, the king said, amusement deep in his voice. You should look, Baroth. The noble's face blanched. My lord, enough. The king lifted his goblet. A toast. To those who dare speak truth in a room full of liars. The courtiers followed reluctantly, eyes flicking toward Kale with a mix of fury and fascination. The sisters said nothing, but when the king's attention turned elsewhere, Visa leaned close. You just insulted one of the most powerful houses in Cautheries, she hissed. Kale smiled faintly. Then I'm making friends in all the right places. You're insane, Lyra said. No, he said softly. Just tired of fear pretending to be wisdom. That night, Visa found him alone in the courtyard, where the air shimmered faintly from the heat of underground rivers of flame. You shouldn't provoke them, she said. Kale didn't turn. They were already provoked, he said. I just gave them a reason to stop pretending. You think defiance makes you strong? She asked. No, he said. I think it makes me real. The honesty in his tone stopped her. For the first time since the decree, she didn't see arrogance in him, only something raw and human. You really don't fear us? She asked quietly. Should I? He said, glancing back. Her golden eyes met his, searching. Everyone fears us, she whispered. Then maybe that's the problem, he said. Maybe that's why none of you remember what respect feels like. Visa didn't reply. For once, her anger faltered, leaving only confusion. She turned sharply and left, her boots echoing against the stone. From the shadows above, Lyra and Silith watched silently. "He's changing her," Lyra murmured. "He's changing you," Silith said. Lyra smirked faintly. "Impossible. Humans don't change demons." Silith looked at her sister, then back at the human standing alone beneath the red sky. "Then what's he doing?" Lyra didn't answer. She didn't have one. Below them, Kale lifted his gaze toward the twin moons rising over Cothares, their light painting his features in shades of defiance and wonder. Somewhere deep in the palace, the king watched through unseen eyes, a knowing smile curling his lips. In the days that followed, the court began to shift around him. Servants whispered greetings instead of scurrying away. A young scribe asked Kale about the world beyond the infernal borders. Even a captain of the guard, horns scarred and temper sharp, offered a grudging nod as he passed. Change in Cothares was like pressure in a volcano, slow, dangerous, unstoppable once begun. The sisters felt it too. Their conversations with Kale turned from taunts to questions, from defiance to reluctant understanding. He spoke of Earth, not with pride, but with longing, describing storms that cooled the skin, forests that hummed with rain, skies that didn't bleed light but cradled it. They listened, though they pretended not to. Something ancient in them stirred. Still, not all welcomed the shift. Word spread of a plot against the human. A noble house humiliated by his defiance now sought to restore order. Silith brought the news one night, her voice low. "They plan to strike during the next court gathering," she said. "They'll claim it was justice, and the king will not interfere twice." Kale looked at her steadily. "Then we don't give them the chance." Visa frowned. "You plan to run?" "No," he said. "I plan to remind them that power doesn't mean cruelty." Lyra crossed her arms. "And how do you plan to do that?" Kale smiled faintly. "By teaching you three how humans survive impossible odds." For once, none of them laughed. The great hall of Cothares gleamed that morning with the chill light of crystal fire. Every noble in the realm had gathered, drawn by rumor and malice alike. Word had spread that the human would stand before the court once more, this time not as a curiosity, but as the subject of judgment. Kale could feel the weight of every gaze as he walked across the marble floor, the sisters trailing behind him. They looked different now, less certain, less untouchable. Lyra's mocking smile had dimmed into calculation, Visa's fury had cooled into something more guarded, and Silith's eyes, always calm, now flickered with something dangerously close to loyalty. The court buzzed like a living storm, hungry for spectacle. The noble Baroth waited at the center of the hall, his silver armor gleaming like ice. The mark of Kale's earlier defiance still stained his pride. "Human," he said, voice echoing, "you stand accused of insult, sedition, and polluting the king's daughters with heretical notions." The hall murmured. Kale stood silent, feeling the faint pulse of his heartbeat matching the rhythm of the enchanted torches. "You forgot one," he said. "Truth." The crowd hissed. Baroth sneered. "Then let the truth defend you. I challenge you to the right of dominion." Winner's word becomes law. Gasps filled the air. The right wasn't combat, it was spectacle, battle bound by sorcery, watched by gods and demons alike. The loser didn't die. They were unmade. The king leaned back in his throne, golden eyes unreadable. "Do you accept, human?" he asked. Kale didn't hesitate. "I do." The sisters exchanged glances, shock, disbelief, something else. "He'll die," Lyra whispered. "Worse," Visa said softly. "He'll vanish." The king raised his hand. "Then let the rite begin." The hall transformed. Pillars of molten glass rose around them, forming a circle of containment. The runes along the floor ignited, pulsing with red and violet light. Baroth drew his weapon, a blade forged from the bones of fallen archons, its edge humming with heat. Kale had no weapon, only the silver cuffs still clinging to his wrists. He flexed his hands slowly, eyes never leaving his opponent. The opening strike came fast, a flash of silver and flame. Kale dodged barely in time, the sword's heat brushing his cheek. He rolled, grabbed a fallen shard of crystal from the ground, and deflected the next blow. The sound cracked like thunder. Baroth grinned. You think mortal reflexes will save you? They already did, Kale said. He ducked, swept Baratha's legs, and struck with the shard, forcing the noble to stumble back. The crowd roared. Power built in Baratha's hands, flames coiling around his gauntlets. He slammed his palms together, unleashing a wave of searing light. Kale raised his arms, bracing for impact, but before the fire struck, the cuffs on his wrists flared, absorbing the heat instead of burning. For a heartbeat, the hall went silent. The sisters looked at each other in shock. The chains, Silith whispered. They were meant to suppress him. Not anymore, Lyra said softly. He's turned them. Kale felt the energy coursing through his arms, wild and alive. The silver cuffs cracked, their enchantments unraveling. Power surged through him, not magic, but something raw, a fusion of will and endurance. He hurled the energy outward, meeting Baratha's next strike head-on. The resulting explosion shattered the inner barrier, sending shards of molten glass raining down. Kale staggered but didn't fall. Baroth did. His armor smoked, his weapon melted to slag. Kale stepped forward slowly, his voice steady. You said winner's word becomes law. My word is this: no one in this court will ever call truth treason again. The hall froze. Then, slowly, the king began to clap. The sound echoed, low and deliberate. Enough, he said. The rite is complete. Baratha's body faded, dissolved by his own broken spell. The nobles murmured, fear, disbelief, reluctant awe. The king rose. A human who survives a dominion trial, he said. Unheard of. His gaze moved to his daughters. And yet, perhaps inevitable. Visa bowed her head. Father, the rite was manipulated. No, Silith said quietly. He won. We saw it. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. We all did. The king's eyes glowed faintly, amusement flickering like embers. Then it is settled, he said. The court has its answer. The human stands, not by favor, but by merit. When the hall emptied, Kale found himself alone with the sisters. None spoke at first. The silence between them was thicker than any argument. Finally, Visa broke it. You should be dead. Probably, Kale said, sitting against a pillar. But then you'd miss me. She glared, but her expression softened. You're reckless. You're welcome. Lyra laughed softly. You actually believe you changed something today. Kale looked up at her. Didn't I? She hesitated. Silith knelt beside him, her green skin shimmering faintly in the dim light. You did, she said. For us. Her hand brushed one of the broken cuffs, curiosity in her touch. What are you, human? He smiled faintly. Just stubborn. That night, Kale's victory spread through Cautheries faster than wildfire. Whispers turned into declarations, and soon the human's name echoed through every corridor. Servants began to walk straighter, guards watched him with unease instead of contempt, and for the first time in centuries, the court trembled not from anger, but from uncertainty. In the king's private chambers, the monarch stood before a burning map of his domain, tracing its edges with one claw. He's unraveling the order, Visa said, standing before him. He's dangerous. The king's voice was calm. Good. Lyra frowned. Good. Cautheries has been dying for centuries, he said. Sometimes, to renew a fire, you must first break the furnace. Silith bowed her head. And us. Stay near him, the king said. Learn why he burns without magic. The sisters returned to Kale's quarters in silence. He was at the balcony, staring out at the rivers of lava that flowed through the city's heart. You're not sleeping, Lyra said. You neither, Kale replied. Visa folded her arms. You humiliated a noble house. You've made enemies that we'll never forget. I'm used to that. Silith studied him quietly. You're not afraid of the king, either. Should I be? Everyone is, Lyra said softly. Even us. Cale turned, his gaze steady. Then maybe that's what he's trying to change. The words hung in the air, heavier than any of them expected. Outside, the flames of Cautheres burned lower than usual, as if the city itself was holding its breath. When the sisters finally left, Cale stayed by the window until dawn. The first pale light touched the towers of the infernal palace, and the city shimmered like molten glass. He didn't know what the next day would bring, only that the balance had shifted. The king was watching, the nobles were plotting, and the sisters were no longer his enemies. Somewhere in their defiance, he'd found reflection instead of mockery. Humanity had come to Cautheres not to conquer, but to remind it of its own forgotten heart. And as the fires burned low, Cale whispered to himself the same words that had carried him through 100 battles before. Survive first, then change everything. The heat of Cautheres was unrelenting that day. The city's forges blazed with renewed fury, as if mirroring the tension that had gripped its heart. The aftermath of the rite had turned the kingdom into a living rumor, one that spread faster than flame through oil. Every corridor of the palace thrummed with whispered disbelief. A mortal had defeated a dominion noble under the king's gaze, and lived. Some called it blasphemy. Others, prophecy. And beneath the echo of those whispers, something older stirred, something the demons had long forgotten, hope wrapped in rebellion. Cale walked the outer terraces, the crimson light of the sky casting his shadow far across the city. He had no illusions of peace. Every victory here demanded blood to balance it. The sisters followed him at a distance, their usual confidence tempered now by an unfamiliar caution. Lyra broke the silence first. The king's council meets at dusk, she said. They'll demand a resolution. They'll demand his head, Visa muttered. They can't, Silith said softly. Father's decree binds him. Decrees burn, Visa replied. Politics burns faster. Cale stopped at the edge of the terrace, turning to face them. You think I don't know they'll come, he said. Let them. Visa stepped closer, fire flickering faintly around her horns. You're not immortal, human. You've stirred an empire built on ego and fear. They won't stop until you're nothing but ash. Then we'll find out whether ash can still choke them, Cale said calmly. That calmness unsettled her. There was no bravado in it, no arrogance, just a quiet certainty that made her pulse quicken in ways she didn't understand. You talk like you've already lost, she said. No, Cale replied. Like I've already accepted what losing costs. Silith studied him. And what do you think victory costs? He looked at her for a long moment. Everything worth saving. The words silenced them. They followed as he descended into the lower halls, places rarely visited by royalty. The air grew cooler there, the walls rougher, the light dimmer. They passed workers, smiths, even children, people who should have bowed, yet didn't. They only watched, eyes wide with something resembling reverence. They're not afraid of you, Lyra said quietly. Maybe they shouldn't be, Cale said. In the forge chamber, he stopped before the great anvil where the weapons of Cautheres were born. The forge master, an ancient demon with skin like cracked stone, bowed his head slightly. The mortal, he said. You made my fires burn hotter than they have in years. Cale gave a faint smile. Glad to be of service. The king ordered your armament reforged, the old smith said. Something worthy of your defiance. He gestured toward a long blade resting on the anvil. Its edge shimmered with both metal and light, its hilt bound in scales of silver and obsidian. It's called Remnant, the smith said. Made from your broken chains. Cale lifted the weapon, feeling its weight, the hum of energy beneath the steel. Fitting, he murmured. When they returned to the upper halls, the council chamber doors were already open. The king sat at the head of the long obsidian table, surrounded by the lords of the dominion. Their eyes burned with fury and fear alike. You have disrupted balance, one snarled. You invite heresy into the court, said another. You dare make mockery of our laws. The king raised his hand, silencing them. Our laws are not God's, he said. They serve us, not the other way around. The nobles stiffened, unused to such defiance even from their ruler. The king turned his gaze to Kale. You've given my people something they don't understand, he said. Choice. Choice is dangerous, Kale said quietly. But it's better than chains. Lyra stepped forward. Father, they mean to move against you, she said. House Baratha's remnants have rallied the Northern Guard. They claim Kale's defiance has infected the lower ranks. The king's eyes darkened. Then they've mistaken infection for awakening. He rose slowly, the floor vibrating beneath his steps. Let them march. Let them see what happens when pride meets purpose. Kale stepped beside him. If they march for you, they'll march for what they think you are, he said. They'll never see what you're trying to build. The king regarded him curiously. And what am I trying to build, human? Kale hesitated, then said, a kingdom that remembers what it means to fight for something greater than fear. The king's lips curved faintly. Then perhaps you understand me better than my own blood, he said. His gaze flicked toward the sisters, who stood silent now, caught between duty and revelation. You three have watched him longer than any, the king said. Tell me, does he speak truth? Visa's jaw tightened. He speaks madness. But, Silith began, her voice steady, madness that sounds like freedom. Lyra nodded reluctantly. He's changing things. Whether we want it or not. The king's gaze lingered on them a moment longer, then turned back to Kale. Then let it be tested. He gestured to the assembled nobles. Cautheres will not be ruled by fear of one mortal. Let him stand as my champion in the coming trial. Gasps filled the chamber. Visa's eyes widened. You can't mean, the trial of crowns, Lyra finished. The king nodded. If he prevails, the Dominion will accept his presence as decree. If he fails, he will be forgotten, and Cautheres will burn the memory of him from its history. Kale met the king's gaze. When? At dawn, the king said. The council erupted in protest, but the king silenced them with a glare. Leave, he commanded. The room emptied, leaving only Kale and the sisters. You realize this is suicide, Visa said. Maybe, Kale said. Or maybe it's the first real fight they'll remember. Silith looked at him. You're not doing this for yourself. He shook his head. No. For everyone who thought they couldn't stand. That night, the sisters found him in the courtyard once more, the air alive with embers drifting from the forges below. We could help, Lyra said. If you'd let us. Kale looked at them, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. You already are. You think words will save you? Visa said. No, he replied. But maybe they'll save you. She frowned. Why would you care? Because I see what you could be, he said quietly. Not what this place made you. None of them replied. The silence stretched, filled with the soft crackle of distant flame. Somewhere above, the twin moons burned red, heralding dawn. Kale rose, gripping Remnant by the hilt. Time to see if truth bleeds the same color as pride. When morning came, Kale walked alone to the great arena. Thousands gathered, nobles, soldiers, servants, even slaves from the lowest pits. The king sat high above, his daughters beside him. The trial of crowns had begun. Across the ring stood three of Cautheres' greatest champions, each one a living weapon. The crowd roared, a wave of noise that felt almost divine. Kale exhaled slowly, steadying his pulse. He could feel the heat of the ground, the weight of every gaze. He wasn't here to prove humanity's strength. He was here to prove that weakness, when embraced, could become something greater. When the horn sounded, he lifted Remnant, and met the storm head-on. The arena of Cautheres had never been silent before. It was built for violence, an amphitheater carved from the bones of a dying god, where demons screamed and cheered as blood turned the sand to glass. But now, as the humans stepped forward, silence fell like a curtain. Kale walked barefoot across the crimson sand, the heat searing his feet but grounding him. He could feel the vibration of the crowd above, thousands holding their breath as one. At the far end of the ring stood the three champions, the warlord of ash, the seer of chains, and the beast of ember. Each had slain armies in the king's name. Now they stood arrayed against him, waiting to crush the story that had dared to spread. High above, the king sat unmoving on his obsidian throne. His daughters stood at his side, their faces masks of composure, but their eyes betrayed them. Visa's hands clenched against the railing, Lyra's laughter had gone completely still, and Silitha's calm expression trembled at the edges. None of them could look away. Kale raised his sword, remnant, forged from the remnants of his own captivity. The weapon's light shimmered faintly, not divine, not infernal, but something in between. By the king's decree, the herald called, voice booming through the air, let the trial of crowns begin. The horn sounded, and the arena came alive. The warlord of ash struck first, his hammer descending like a comet. Kale rolled aside, the impact blasting a crater where he'd stood. The shockwave hurled molten sand across the arena floor. Kale countered, slicing across the warlord's arm. Sparks flew, not blood, but black fire, spilling into the air. The crowd roared. The seer of chains moved next, her movements elegant, precise. Chains made of pure will coiled from her hands, wrapping around Kale's sword arm. He twisted, pulling the chains tight, then yanked hard, dragging her off balance. The beast of ember lunged, a creature of smoke and muscle, jaws glowing from inner flame. Kale dove beneath its strike, slashing its flank as he rolled clear. Each motion was instinct, desperation honed into purpose. Impossible, hissed one of the nobles watching from above. He can't hold against three. But Kale wasn't holding. He was adapting. Every cut, every block, every near-fatal dodge drew power from what they thought made him weak, his mortality, his fear, his stubborn refusal to yield. The warlord roared and charged again. Kale sidestepped at the last instant, driving Remnant into the ground. The weapon hummed, its silver light pulsing outward. The runes along the arena floor flickered, shifting color from infernal red to pale human blue. What is he doing? Silith whispered. The king's eyes narrowed. He's rewriting the field. The enchantments designed to favor demons were unraveling, restructured by a will that didn't belong here. The seer of chains cried out as her bindings snapped. The beast of ember stumbled, its flames dimming. Kale seized the opening, driving forward. His blade struck true, first the warlord, then the seer, each blow resonating with defiance. But the beast was not so easily undone. It rose again, bellowing, the air around it igniting into stormfire. Kale braced, his breath ragged. "You're not my enemy," he whispered. The creature hesitated, flames sputtering uncertainly. "They made you this," he said louder. "They made me this. Let's end it." For a heartbeat, the arena seemed to hold its breath, and then, impossibly, the beast turned, releasing its fury not at Kale, but at the nobles in the stands above. Chaos erupted. Demons screamed as fire tore through the lower tiers. Kale leapt, driving his sword deep into the creature's neck, not as an execution, but as a release. The beast stilled, collapsing into ash and light. The arena fell silent again, save for the wind. Kale stood alone, remnant buried in the earth, the bodies of his enemies gone to dust. Slowly, he turned toward the throne. "It's done," he said. His voice carried through the smoke. The king rose. "So it is," he said. "And what have you proven, human?" Kale met his gaze. "That truth doesn't need a crown to rule." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The king's golden eyes gleamed, not with fury, but with something like pride. He descended the steps, the ground trembling under his weight. "You've broken our order," the king said quietly. "You've given my people something I could not." Kale straightened, exhausted but unbowed. "Then keep it," he said. The king smiled faintly. You misunderstand. You've proven yourself greater than any who stood before you, not by conquest, but by conviction. And so, he turned to his court, his voice rising. Let all of Cautheres bear witness. The human who defied us will not be condemned, he will be honored. By decree of the throne, Kale of Sol is no longer servant, but sovereign guest of the infernal court. And those who once mocked him shall stand beside him, not as guards, but as equals. Gasps swept the chamber. The three sisters stared at their father in shock. Father, Visa began, but the king silenced her with a raised hand. The decree is spoken. You mocked him. You tested him. Now you will learn from him. He turned back to Kale. You came here seeking answers, human. Now you will help me ask better questions. Kale's voice was steady. You'd make me part of your court? You already are, the king said. You burned brighter than fear itself. The crowd erupted, not with laughter, but with something rawer, uncertain. The old order cracked like cooling stone. For the first time, the fires of Cautheres seemed to flicker in awe, not hunger. That night, the halls of the palace were quiet. Kale sat by a window overlooking the city, the molten rivers below flowing like veins of light through the darkness. The sisters entered silently, no longer sneering, no longer sure of their place. Lyra spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. You realize what you've done? Kale didn't look away from the view. I gave them a choice, he said. Visa folded her arms, though her tone lacked venom. You've made enemies of half the realm. Then it's a good start, he said softly. Silith stepped closer, her expression unreadable. And us? She asked. What are we now to you? Kale turned, his eyes reflecting the city's light. You'll decide that, he said. That's the point. The three stood in silence for a long time, the weight of centuries of pride settling like ash. Then, slowly, Lyra smiled, not the sharp, mocking curve of before, but something real. You're impossible, she said. So I've been told, Kale replied. Visa shook her head, laughing quietly. And yet, somehow, I'm not angry. That's dangerous, he said. Silitha's lips curved faintly. For who? Everyone, Kale said. Outside, the infernal winds carried the scent of change, hot, bitter, alive. The king watched from his high chamber, expression unreadable. In the reflection of his golden eyes burned 3 daughters and a human who had turned mockery into legend. Kale of Sol had not conquered Cautheres. He had reminded it how to feel.